And now for something completely machinima.
Tracy Harwood. So I've done a little bit of digging around and I've discovered.
Ricky Grove. Fog comes in on little cat feet.
Phil Rice. This is the best film that I've seen all year and maybe ever.
Damien Valentine. Use the machinima, Luke. Hello and welcome to another episode of And Now for Something Completely Machinima. I'm Damien Valentine and I'm joined by Phil Rice and Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
Hello.
Ricky is absent this week. It's January, so he is currently getting ready for Halloween. We look forward to seeing what he does there. But we will be talking about a film pick, and this time it's mine, and it's called The Little Limpet, which is a film made with EliteDangerous. Now, this actually came up. I was setting up my Blue Sky account and following all the same people that I followed on Twitter. And I'm afraid I don't remember the original post, but someone said this is the best EliteDangerous film I've ever seen. So immediately I clicked the link to watch it. And it's very different. It's not what you'd expect from an EliteDangerous film. This is more of a Pixar type film. And it's made by someone called Commander Nick Webb 85. Now, the Commander is a title that every player in EliteDangerous has. That's how you recognize other players. So Nick Webb has created this film, and it's about a limpet, which in the game is these robotic drones that you can have for your ship, and they've got different purposes, like you can refuel other players, or you can mine or repair other ships, and so on. Now, the purpose of this particular limpet, I believe, is mining, and the idea is, it's that it gets left behind by the player. Like this returns the ship, and the ship jumps away before it can get back, and so it's kind of left stranded in space, and it's got a little animated face it's got a little sad face on it. Now, I believe the limpet itself was animated in Blender, but the actual background footage is from the game, so they combined the two sets of footage. But you wouldn't know it because they've combined the way they composited it. It looks like it's in the game. Oftentimes you'll see something compositing. Yeah, I can see that that's not quite lined up right. The lighting is off, or there's a line, an edge around where they haven't quite removed the background from the top layer. Like you can see in my hand here in this video. This looks perfect. That is all done in one. And I will say that there is actually a second episode, which is I think that's more Blender. It's worth watching as well. But I think I prefer the first one. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, well, if you want me to go first, Phil?
Sure.
I mean, I think this is interesting. To me, it's basically a kid's story about this droid-like bot, which, you say is called a limpet in the game. Obviously, I don't play the game, so I don't know very much about the game. But clearly, from watching this, you definitely get the sense that it's a story where this droid mines asteroid rocks and then returns them to the mothership for, I don't know, for analysis or treasure or cargo. You're not really too sure exactly why they go back to the ship. But I think what's intriguing about it is this has this kind of Disney-like quality to it. And as you say, made in Blender using the game's assets. And I think it's both the sound it makes and also this lead face on this limpet that kind of, well, it looks a bit Wally's Eve-like. Do you remember that character?
Yeah, I thought of Wally a lot watching this.
Yeah, I did, and it's clearly the way that it's used, that facial animation on that little lead panel is clearly designed to sort of be its communication tool. And I think it's kind of intriguing. It's somehow got this kind of happy-go-lucky sort of fun and peaceful spirit to it. And then there's this kind of taint of danger thrown in, although it's not really made all that much of in terms of the actual nature of the threat that this little bot faces during its time away from the mothership. I think also what adds to this, actually, that gives you the sense of this Disney likeness to it, or the Pixar likeness to it, is the quality of the scoring, which was by Tokoso. And actually, I think it's that soundscape and the music that it's put to is it just really enhances the perceived quality of the animation and the communication of that kind of story. And I think if I'm being really critical, I think it's actually the soundscape, that music, that scoring that actually carries it through. Let me explain what I mean there. I think it's quite interesting how this creator has managed to build a personality for this droid. And by the end of these 3 minutes that you are watching this, you get really invested in this bot finding its mothership, with emphasis being on the word mother. It's almost like it's a lost calf in a David Attenborough or National Geo kind of. Although why a ship would return, I've no idea. But then, why things happen in a natural environment too isn't always that clear. But after creating that level of investment in our sort of lead character, this little bot, I think what's strange is the ending, and it's both a surprise and a bit of a downer. Now, I won't reveal the sort of specifics of it. Suffice to say, I'm not sure why you would go to all the bother to develop and illustrate the personality of this little bot in order to tell its story with a focus on that single limpet, if it was going to be its last journey, which it clearly is. So what I took from this is that it's actually an experimental film. It's not designed to be a story. It's just purely an experiment where the creator is attempting to learn how to portray emotions through story and characterization. And I think at that level, the creator has certainly succeeded. I mean, you really do go on an emotional journey with this. There's a lot of depth to it. But it's also quite simplistically done. You do get a sense, for example, of fulfillment and fun, and also fear and danger, and then determination and relief and a little bit of love, but then also sadness and disappointment, or an appreciation of the real danger that this little droid faces in the end, if you like. And all of that, I think, is brilliantly well crafted, but perhaps what it lacks in general is an actual story that makes sense. Or maybe that's the point, that there just isn't a story. I mean, in the game, are limpets just disposable things, or is there more of a point to them? And I think if it's the latter, then this short perhaps needed more of a wider context in relation to the role of a limpet to convey how and why the life of this one limpet was worth that focus. And I'm only saying it to be sort of kind of super critical, because I do think there's something there. There's something there, so much so that I actually went and looked at episode 2 because I wanted to see what else he had done with it. And I have to say, I actually liked episode 2 more than this first one. But that's because it really reminded me of those beautifully synchronous swimming scenes from those classic Busby Barkley movies that we used to love as kids. And again, in it, there's no story as such, but somehow that portrayal of those little droids performing this space ballet, it's not an opera here, it's a space ballet, just somehow seemed to make a little bit more sense than what we saw in this particular episode. I guess the only thing that disappointed me in that was the fact that the creator didn't properly credit the music, which was Strauss's Viennese Waltz in that episode too, which I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't do that. But yeah, those are my general thoughts. I don't know if they kind of make sense, but that's where it led me to on the way I was thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. So my impression of part 1 was almost identical to yours, Tracy, before seeing part 2, in that it's a sense of, all right, there's a loose story here, but yeah, it doesn't really make any sense to me. That the only interpretation of the story that I could that was lifting out of it for me was a very dark one of almost nihilistic, like you said, that this thing is just, why did we follow the story of this limpet just to see it be decommissioned? We're kind of spoiling the hell out of it now, but oh well.
It's only 3 minutes long. There's not a huge amount to it.
Right. So I was like really ready to like criticize it. I'm still going to criticize it, but the criticism's a little different after having seen part 2. It's certainly not a story with a clear-cut narrative, so to speak, but there's a story there. There's something there. My criticism now would be the choice to split it between part 1 and part 2, where the creator chose to split it. That makes all the difference in the world. Again, spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, then pause and go watch it and come back. But, for all intents and purposes, the limpet is essentially presumed dead at the end of episode 1. Less than a minute into episode 2, it's clear that's not going to be the long-term outcome, right? Why stop at the death? It's like there's nothing to really carry you into the next chapter. So, and how to explain that? Did he not have part 2 planned until part 1, maybe performed better than he thought? And so, I guess I'll continue this now. I don't know. Either way, it's still, if it was always planned for part 1 to end in a demise, then why all this, why was Tom Cook's music so uplifting and so Pixar-ish and Disney-ish and like a happy, like you said, it felt like a children's tale almost, So yeah, it's to me, it's a strange decision to have spliced it between let's assume that the 2 episodes were always planned. So why split it there? Split it a little bit after, when the light comes back on the limpet. And so you're like, oh, okay, he's all right. That to me would have been more appropriate. Even if you weren't going to do part 2. So there's not a whole lot to grasp onto in terms of narrative structure here. It's more of like a narrative feeling, I guess. And there's some questions that I have that maybe a player of the game wouldn't have, in terms of, where do these limpets fit into nature's hierarchy in that world? Are they just like something that's almost an afterthought, and he's chosen to let's go macro on those little forgotten creatures that are part of what makes the world tick? Is this that type of thing? I don't know. Maybe so. How much that would change what I feel, I don't know. I don't know how to estimate that, but that's kind of a sense that I get of it, is that these limpets, assuming they're called that in the game, they're not necessarily something that a lot of attention is called to within the game itself. They're like a side thing.
Yeah, they're a piece of equipment you can attach to your ship. So it's like an MMO, but instead of a character of swords or whatever, like Warcraft.
Gotcha.
Your ship's your character.
So they're not central to the EliteDangerous overall narrative,
I've never even
or
used
world, or
them
whatever.
when I played it. So they're completely optional.
Yeah. So that's and that's the kind of machinima that Ricky in particular likes, is paying attention to something in the game world that maybe wasn't intended to draw tons of attention, but let's focus in on that and see what story we could pull out of that. He talks about it within the context of games like Red Dead Redemption, right? Some side NPC that you see in one scene, and let's go tell that guy's story, and those work really well. It's more challenging in this, as a silent film, and all the Wall-E-ish things that we're naturally going to, anyone who's watched those types of films, they're naturally going to impose that and bring that as baggage to this film. So I think a lot of the sympathetic nature of the limpet character in this is inherited from those traditions more than it's been actually earned in this film, if that makes sense. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with leaning on traditions. So yeah, I was confused by part 1 by itself. I was a little bit less confused after part 2, but not because the narrative, I feel like, was given any real resolution, but just more of just a sense of I was really revulsed by the idea of that Limpet's narrative being over in the way that chapter one leaves you thinking. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't really it wasn't like, oh, you got me really attached to this and now I'm upset that you killed off the character. It's more of just a sense of that doesn't really make any sense. It's like, I don't know. It's weird because we want to encourage people to not be slaves to narrative cliches and such, and yet if it's not bolted onto something, then it's hard to digest. It's hard to contextualize. It's hard to know what to make of it. Yeah, the compositing, I think if I think about it from the point of view of a filmmaker, I feel pretty confident I can intuit where he would have used compositing. But visually, I can't detect it. Like it's really nicely done.
I think it's more obvious in the second part.
Okay.
But
yeah, that's probably true. I wasn't watching it, the second part with analytical eyes like that. So you're probably right. Yeah. But in the first one, yeah, it's pretty nice. I mean, there was even one point where a shadow came into play on one of the asteroids that it was going to connect with, and I found myself wondering, gee, now is that compositing? And if it was, how would you do that? That's interesting, you know?
Yeah.
So it's nice. It's nicely made, you know, visually. I do like the composer's stuff. Tom Cook is his name. He goes by Tokoso. I read up a little bit on him on his website. He's been playing EliteDangerous for 10 years and has made like a little side thing of creating music for people who do YouTube stuff with EliteDangerous. And he's done it for at least a dozen short films like this. And even released and then created some stuff just of his own that's of an EliteDangerous theme, I guess you would say, and released them as like little independent albums. So yeah, I that's a man after my heart for sure. I like that. So, but yeah, it's neat that it's not just someone that was hired out from somewhere. It gets my imagination going of, so how did they encounter each other? How did they find each other? Because he was there doing this and Nick Webb 85 found out about it. I don't know. There's a story there that's probably kind of charming. So I'm wondering if the reason that the classical music that you pointed out was in use in part two, Tracy. Now, Tom Cook is credited as music and additional sound in the description of that video, just like he is in the first one. So if that is a classical piece and it's out of public domain, if it's in public domain, the actual piece itself, then maybe Tom performed it. In which case he's covered there.
That piece of music has a long history with the Elite games as well. Like they
does it? Okay.
Yeah.
And it very much evokes a lot of that Kubrick 2001.
That's why it's in the game.
Right. Right.
In one of the older games, when you're talking with a space station, you have the option of having music play, and it would usually be that piece that would come just like in 2001.
Yeah. But it's not the is it the same piece as 2001? Because I think the 2001, wasn't it like the Blue Danube or something? Is the
that's one of the options as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were inspired by 2001 and then put various famous classical pieces in.
Yeah. It works. Yeah. It works for a background of, especially with how they choreographed this like ballet scene. It works really nicely for that. Yeah. So anyway, I guess I'm left with mixed feelings about it. I feel like a little bit more could have been done narrative wise. That would, to me, would have made it more interesting. Like I would have even loved to see. Are you familiar with the children's book called "Are You My Mother"?
Don't think so. No.
Okay, this is it's of the Dr. Seuss variety of book with the illustrations and everything, but it's not a Dr. Seuss title, I don't believe. It's someone else. But it's this baby bird that falls out of the nest and then goes on this little quest to find its mother. And so it's asking all these different creatures and things that it encounters, are you my mother?
Actually,
And,
I think I am familiar with this, but I just didn't remember
yeah,
the
it's a
title for it.
classic. It's a
Yeah.
classic. So I very much I found myself started like visualizing of, oh, you could do something like that with this, where the limpet is the lost baby bird and the mothership is the mother, of course. So yeah, I guess that's a sign when the narrative is maybe not quite as compelling as it could be, is that your mind starts fabricating other possibilities for it, you know? So anyway, it's one thing in particular that I'll give it a definite hats off for is it definitely defies the expectations of what one would expect from an Elite Dangerous film. And maybe that's what that commenter meant, Damien, when they said this is the best ever. Is really what the essence of what they're saying there is, this is not like anything you'd ever expect from that. And in that sense, that's correct. That is. And I like that. I like the idea of playing with it in that way. So yeah, good pick.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to
Absolutely.
check out that music composer because I didn't check the description, which I should have done. I do like the idea that games can inspire creativity, not just in machinima, but other forms as well, like fan art, and in this case, music.
Yeah, he's got a whole tab. He's got tabs across the top of the website, right? And one of the tabs is Elite Dangerous, and it's just all about his history with the game and then examples of music that he's done, and the albums are down at the bottom. It's pretty sharp, and his picture is on the homepage. He looks like a musician.
Okay.
Not what you'd expect him to look like. Yeah, he looks cool, man. He looks really cool. So.
Well, you know what
Anyway.
I'm going to be listening to after we finish recording today?
Yeah, for you listeners, if you don't want to dig into the description, it's tomcooksound.co.uk.
There we go.
That's his website.
Well, I think that's everything we've got to say about this film. For our listeners, if you have anything to say about Elite Dangerous or The Little Limpet, or if you're involved with the project and you want to give us some feedback and tell us how we're right or wrong, please send us an email at talk@completelyMachinima.com. You can check out our blog at completelyMachinima.com, and we'll be back next week with another film. So take care and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.